It has been 2 years since the stories of sexual predation by movie mega producer Harvey Weinstein burst into the national consciousness through blockbuster reporting from Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey at the New York Times, and then very shortly thereafter by Ronan Farrow at the New Yorker magazine. And whether or not Weinstein's predatory behavior had been an open secret in Hollywood or not, most of us don't live in Hollywood. And so what we, the public, have now seen unspool over time has had a few different layers and a few different layers of impact. I mean, the first is just the story of Harvey Weinstein's predation itself. I mean, the scale and scope of the allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault and rape stretching over decades. And it all follows the same pattern, allegedly isolating young women, getting them alone, women who were in a position of either directly working for Weinstein or being professionally dependent on him as a big Hollywood producer. And then the alleged behaviors, just textbook sexual harassment up to and including serious allegations of serious sexual assault. The same description from all these different women over and over again. Him taking off his clothes, him exposing himself, demanding sex, demanding sexual contact of various kinds, refusing to take no for an answer. And then him allegedly retaliating against young women who managed to get away from him, managed to escape, managed to rebuff what he was trying to do. And because there was such a distinct pattern in the allegations, because the allegations stretched over such a long period of time, because it was supposedly this kind of open secret in Hollywood, the reporting was really, really disturbing, right? I mean, it's a horror show in terms of the individual encounters that have been recounted by these women. But it's a story about America, too, right? This rot in the culture, right at this apex of American culture that allowed this very powerful guy in the American movie business to allegedly commit these acts over and over again with the complicity of so many people, victimizing even women who were well-known and seemingly powerful in their own right. Even if he didn't care about Hollywood, this was a riveting story with all kinds of very upsetting implications. The second part of the Weinstein story was the reporting about what he did to keep his alleged behavior secret, or at least shielded from the media or from legal scrutiny for so long. The high-power, household name, famous lawyers and the very expensive PR firms. These folks making legal threats for him, arranging financial payouts to his accusers that came with non-disclosure agreements so that the accusers couldn't talk, organizing smear campaigns against the accusers when they did talk to make them seem crazy, to undermine their claims. And then beyond that, there was this other layer of stuff we've really never heard about before, which is about, I guess, what you'd call the more Baroque tactics that he brought to bear. Ronan Farrow reported vividly on Weinstein hiring a foreign private intelligence firm staffed largely by former agents of the Israeli intelligence service. These agents adopted a variety of fake identities. They pretended to be all sorts of different kinds of people to try to get close to at least one of Weinstein's accusers, to try to gain trust, to try to find out what this accuser might plan to say about Weinstein, also to gather dirt that could be used to undermine accusers, to make them, again, seem nuts, seem unreliable. And it wasn't just the people who Weinstein had allegedly attacked who might speak about their experiences with him. The reporters going after the Weinstein story were also targeted by these intelligence operatives. While reporting on the story, Farrow writes about trying to shake off the suspicion that he was being followed, only to later uncover evidence that he was. He had indeed been the subject of a surveillance operation. Ultimately, he met and then interviewed one of the men who'd been following him on foot and surveilling him through his phone. So Weinstein deployed all of these intimidation tactics against the women accusing him and against the reporters and media outlets who were digging into the allegations against him. He also deployed himself, personally making calls and sending emails to news executives, a lot of whom he knew through the business. According to Farrow's reporting, sometimes these calls were belligerent. Weinstein defending himself, demanding information, insisting stories be submarined, trashing the women who were accusing him. But also, in emails Farrow obtained, it was clear that Weinstein could be ingratiating and slippery, talking about deals he was really looking forward to doing with those executives. Ultimately, though, the stories Weinstein tried to stop from coming out, they did come out. Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey were first with the story at the New York Times. Ronan Farrow published just days later at the New Yorker. Together, those reporters would win the freaking Pulitzer Prize for those stories. For his part, Harvey Weinstein is currently awaiting trial on several felony charges, including predatory sexual assault. He's pled not guilty. He has denied all allegations of non-consensual sex. But the last part of the Harvey Weinstein story, the part that's being told right now, is the story of how the story got told at all. The story of great journalism and how it gets done. And in the last few weeks, we've had two of these journalistic thrillers published. Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey told their story in She Said. We spoke to them on the show last month. Now Ronan Farrow is telling his reporting story in Catch and Kill. In his book, Farrow describes the pressure brought to bear on him and his sources and his employers, and really everyone around him, as he tried to report this story. The private detectives following him around, the legal threats, the constant approaches from people representing themselves as fellow journalists or as emissaries from decent-sounding nonprofit organizations. People, it would later emerge, were in fact intelligence agents working on behalf of this Israeli private intelligence firm. There was also the alliance between Weinstein and executives at the National Enquirer, which Farrow says published smear pieces about him when he broke unflattering news. Farrow reported that the Enquirer had gathered dirt on Weinstein's accusers and explored paying at least one of them for her story, not so they could run it, but so they could bury it. And if that sounds familiar, it's because that's a carbon copy of the relationship that the Enquirer had with Donald Trump, whose lawyer Michael Cohen is currently in prison for his role in hush money schemes involving Trump and the Enquirer during the 2016 campaign. But one of the central allegations of Ronan Farrow's book is that amidst this atmosphere of relentless, even creative intimidation and pressure, the story he was working on about Weinstein almost didn't get told. And Farrow says that's because his employer, for the first several months of his reporting, NBC News, slow-walked and even at times tried to stop his reporting. Farrow says he was repeatedly told to pause any new reporting while his story was reviewed by increasingly higher-level executives at NBC. That some executives seemed to feel the Weinstein story was not newsworthy or not worth the trouble. And yes, that's while NBC executives, as I described earlier, were getting repeated calls from Weinstein himself, not to mention his lawyers. It was only when NBC News allowed Ronan Farrow to take his reporting elsewhere that it found a home at The New Yorker magazine. He had worked on the story at NBC News for 7 months when he went to The New Yorker in August 2017. 7 weeks after Ronan left NBC, The Times published their Weinstein story. And 5 days after that, Farrow published his Weinstein story. The piece he had started at NBC, but it ran in The New Yorker magazine. And that piece included the most serious allegations against Weinstein to that point, 3 allegations of rape. NBC News has strenuously denied the allegation that it intentionally stymied Ronan Farrow's reporting. They say his story was simply not up to NBC's standards, nor ready for network TV in August 2017. They say the network was prepared to continue working on the story to get it into shape, but that Ronan wanted to move more quickly, and so they allowed him to go to a print outlet instead. According to NBC, when Ronan Farrow left, he had no Weinstein accusers on the record. Farrow says that when he left NBC, he had, quote, an explosively reportable piece that should have been public earlier. NBC News says his New Yorker article bore little resemblance to his NBC News reporting. But again, that New Yorker piece was less than 2 months after he left this reporting at NBC and took it somewhere else. NBC letting this story get away is, I think the best way I can put it is, when you take NBC's word for it, NBC letting that story get away is a shame. But in Ronan Farrow's telling, it's not a shame, it's a scandal. NBC is saying essentially, it's too bad that story got away. We were really hoping to get it to air once it was ready. Ronan Farrow is saying, no, you were stopping me from getting it to air, and that's why I had to leave. But that's not the only allegation that Farrow levels against NBC News in his book. About 7 weeks after his reporting appeared in The New Yorker in 2017, NBC abruptly fired the longtime host of The Today Show, Matt Lauer, after what NBC called a credible allegation of inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace that was brought to the company's attention. The company never detailed what the specific allegation was that led to Matt Lauer's firing, but The New York Times and Variety quickly had reports out with multiple allegations against Matt Lauer. In his book, Ronan Farrow interviews the woman who made the complaint to NBC Human Resources that resulted in Matt Lauer getting fired. She tells Farrow that it was reading the accounts of Weinstein's accusers in his New Yorker piece that convinced her to make her complaint about Lauer in 2017. And now, in Farrow's book, for the first time, we learn what she alleges happened between her and Lauer. She says while she was covering the Olympics in Sochi in 2014, Matt Lauer raped her in his hotel room while she was both too drunk to consent, and she says she repeatedly told him no. Matt Lauer has vehemently denied this account. He says the encounter was consensual. Farrow alleges in his book that this woman was one of several NBC employees with sexual misconduct allegations against Matt Lauer who received big payouts, accompanied by non-disclosure or non-disparagement agreements. NBC says these payments, those agreements, were all standard. They weren't specific to anybody making any allegations against Lauer. The company says management was unaware of any allegations against Matt Lauer at all before the one allegation for which they fired him. NBC Universal did an internal investigation last year that said as much, that concluded that. But I'll tell you, there has been consternation even inside this building, inside MSNBC and NBC News, that matter was handled with an internal investigation, with the company, in effect, investigating itself rather than hiring an external firm to do it. Now, NBC News is obviously our parent company here at MSNBC. The allegations about the behavior of Harvey Weinstein and Matt Lauer are gut-wrenching at baseline, no matter who you are or what your connection is to this story. But accusations that people in positions of authority in this building may have been complicit in some way in shielding those guys from accountability, those accusations are very, very hard to stomach. And I can tell you that inside this building, this issue, the Weinstein story, having to leave the building in order to get told, and combine that with another previous gigantic story on a related subject, the Access Hollywood tape Billy Bush story, also having to leave this building in order to get told. And the amount of consternation this has caused among the rank and file people who work here would be almost impossible for me to overstate. I've been through a lot of ups and downs in this company since I've been here. It would be impossible for me to overstate the amount of consternation inside the building around this issue. Since Ronan Farrow's book was published, I have been trying to get answers about some of his key allegations as to whether or not Ronan Farrow was told to hit pause on any new reporting at a time when NBC didn't think there was enough to go to air with. We have independently confirmed that NBC News did that did happen. He was told to pause his reporting. In light of Farrow's assertions that there was a pattern at the company of women making allegations against Matt Lauer and being paid off and signing away their rights to speak about it, all before Matt Lauer was ever fired, well, we doubled back with NBC, and they confirmed their denial that ever happened before Matt Lauer was fired. But as far as we can tell, there has never been an independent investigation of that. So until there is an independent investigation of that, if there is ever going to be one, that remains NBC's word versus Ronan Farrow's reporting and assertions. In terms of the specific question of women signing away their right to speak about any such incidents, well, there we actually have a little bit of news tonight. NBC News is now telling us on the record that there is nothing in any non-disparagement or non-disclosure agreement that anyone may have signed with this company that can legally prevent you from talking about your experience. Here's the statement from NBC Universal. This is from a spokesperson from NBC Universal. Quote, "Any former NBC News employee who believes that they cannot disclose their experience with sexual harassment as a result of a confidentiality or non-disparagement provision in their separation agreement should contact NBC Universal, and we will release them from that perceived obligation." So that's new. That's news. As to whether or not any external review will be done of the handling of the Weinstein story and why that story couldn't be broken here, but it later broke with another news organization, whether the company would submit itself to an external journalistic review to try to restore some confidence that the company isn't just further investigating itself and clearing itself on issues like this. Well, again, we did get a statement on this time from NBC News. Short form, I'll tell you their answer is no, that's not going to happen. Quote, "Over a year ago, NBC News released a 12-page transparent accounting of the Weinstein reporting." That's another internal investigation. They told us tonight, quote, "Once again, we stand by it." So, since Ronan Farrow's Weinstein reporting and the saga to get it to print described in his book, you should know that he has gone on to break stories about decades worth of allegations of sexual harassment and assault by the chairman of CBS, Les Moonves, one of the most powerful television executives in the history of this country. Those allegations led Moonves to resign last year. Ronan Farrow also reported with Jane Mayer the stories of 4 women who accused New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman of physical abuse. Schneiderman resigned his post as New York Attorney General 3 hours after that story broke in The New Yorker. Just last month, the director of the elite MIT Media Lab stepped down less than a day after Ronan Farrow reported on emails and documents he'd obtained showing that the lab was more deeply involved than it had admitted with billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, and had accepted lots of money from him even after they knew he was a convicted sex offender. Ronan Farrow's reporting has changed how we understand sexual predation by very, very powerful men in this country, and how we understand the vast resources they can bring, even on powerful institutions, to shield themselves from accountability. And that's worth talking about anywhere, anytime. And Ronan Farrow joins us here next.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.